This is A Line Around Your Thoughts, a podcast that centers on conversations with artists, writers, musicians, and creatives from around the Inland Northwest. I'm your host, EJ Iannelli, and I'm joined today in the Rocart Media Studio by the photographer Dean Davis, who has a new retrospective exhibition that is showing right now at Spokane Falls Community College. So welcome, Dean.
Thanks, EJ. Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm very glad you're here, not least because we have this retrospective exhibition that's coming on, or that's already on. But one of the things with any retrospective exhibition is kind of looking back at something. We have to understand what we're looking back at, and that is a 30-year career in photography. And then, there was a life before that as well that I'd like to get into if possible.
Sure.
So one of the kind of interesting facts I think that you throw out every once in a while is that you were born in Germany.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, born in Würzburg.
Yeah.
And then, you made your way back to Spokane, and then you found yourself in the beer industry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is an unlikely place to start a photography career, but...
Yeah, so I started working at the Fort Spokane Brewery the same day I started photography school. I got hired there as part-time kitchen help. I worked in the kitchen for one day, and then they made me a waiter. And I did that for a couple days. They made me a bartender. After about a month, I was the night manager. And let's just say it was an environment that was easy to excel in, particularly since I was fresh out of the military. But after about 9 months, I'd moved into the assistant manager position, and I bought out one of the smaller owners, and I dropped out of school.
What? So you never finished photography school at SFCC?
No, I went through 2 quarters before I dropped out.
Okay. So what precipitated the enrollment in photography school in the first place? Had you been dabbling in photography throughout high school?
Yeah. I started photography in high school. I was about 16 when I held onto a camera and looked at it and thought, wow, it'd be great if I could make a living one day with a camera. And so I always had harbored that notion. And, when I was in the military, I tried to go in the military as a photographer. And I still am, red-green colorblind. And at that time, that was a non-waiverable condition. So I ended up going into administration and then became a translator. And but the whole time, I was in 7 years. And the whole time I was in, I traveled a lot and shot lots and lots of photos. And I'd always imagined that I would get out, go to photography school, become a photographer. I didn't imagine that I would get wrapped up in the microbrew business. But, there I was, had an opportunity to buy out one of the owners. It was a lot of fun. I was really good at it, the fun part. I just kind of got wrapped up. I did that for about 7 years before... There was a guy who came and spoke to us when I was in school, a photographer, came and spoke to our class. After he left, one of my teachers said, hey, he's looking for an assistant, and I think you'd be a good fit for him. And I went and interviewed with him. I did get hired as his assistant. I worked for him until I dropped out of school. I was his assistant. All that time I was at the brewery after I dropped out of school, he and I stayed friends and were golf buddies. And it was the summer of '96. We were out golfing, and he turned and looked at me and said, hey, I know you want to be a photographer. I know you don't want to work in the bar business the rest of your career. What would you think about leaving the Fort Spokane Brewery and becoming my partner? And at that moment, I wasn't really heading down the road to become a photographer, and it just kind of a lot of things clicked. And I went home and talked to my wife about it, and 6 months later, I left the brewery, and January 1, 1997, I started my photography business with Larry Conboy. That partnership didn't last, but my I was in the field, and I've stayed in business this whole time. So
yeah, and so you did 7 years in the military,
yeah,
and then 7 years in the Fort Spokane Brewery, or the microbrew business.
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
So you had these 2 7-year stints, and one of the just to leap back to that earliest stint, you were a Dutch translator.
Ja, zeker man.
So how did you wind up in that field? What explains the gravitation toward Dutch of all languages?
Yeah, well, I was stationed in Turkey and had spent a great deal of time learning the Turkish language, and had got sort of introduced to the Defense Language Institute, which is in Monterey. We had a couple lieutenants at my nuclear weapons site that had been through there, and I went and took what's called the D Lab, the Defense Language Aptitude Battery, and passed it, qualified to apply for any language that they taught at the Institute. I applied for Turkish because I wanted to go learn it formally and come back to Turkey. And the job that I was in at the time just didn't have any Turkish language positions for that particular job. And so they offered me Dutch, or I could have moved into interrogation or some other fields that I didn't really want to work in.
Yeah.
And so I chose Dutch, and off to Monterey I went, and 7 months of Dutch, and then off to the German-Holland border for a little over 3 years.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, that was great.
And so, yeah, I had seen in previous interviews you've kind of cited 1997 as the turning point, and that was the year when you went pro and you became a full-fledged photographer.
Yeah.
And felt like you'd kind of arrived to some extent, even though I think it would be a little while before Dean Davis photography was established in its own right. But what were those early years like as you were cutting your teeth as a photographer? Did you feel like there was a lot of grunt work, or were you doing a lot of stuff that you enjoyed right out of the gate?
Well, it was hard, for one. I mean, any new business, regardless of what it is really challenging in those first handful of years. I went through two failed partnerships in my first 2 years, and they were partnerships, so the workload was shared equally. It was still the film era. So we didn't have digital cameras yet. We did have a computer, but we weren't shooting anything digital. So there's still time in the dark room, and it was a big learning curve for me. Both of my partners had been through photography school, were established photographers, and I had been largely self-taught, and so it was a lot of learning from them. I'm a big reader, and I have read piles and piles of photography books on all, product photography, portrait photography, lighting, all, anything you can imagine that I get my hands on. But it was tough. I mean, honestly, the first 10 years were tough. Yeah. It's deciding to make a living with a camera it's a difficult way of making a living.
And so, do I detect maybe parenthetically, it's hard to make a living with a camera in Spokane, or it's hard to make a living with a camera full stop?
I think it's really challenging to just make a living as a photographer. I mean, not anymore. Mm-hmm. I'm deep enough into my career where I've gotten to that point where I can make a living and have a great client base and. But early on, particularly on the commercial side of things, it's very different. There's a lot of different fields within under the photography umbrella. There's I break it down into commercial photography and consumer photography. And by consumer, I mean weddings, senior portraits, family portraits, that sort of thing, working with consumers. And on the commercial side of things, you're working with businesses, corporations. And the bar to entry on that commercial side is a lot higher. Oftentimes the people that are hiring me are maybe middle management. They have bosses to answer to. There's a lot riding on their decisions on who they hire. And it just takes a lot of time to build up that rapport and that trust with those folks before they would hire me for big projects.
Yeah, you've got to build up those creds, and
yeah.
And that's something I think that is true of any field.
Absolutely.
Building up that body of work, and people are reluctant to hire folks right out of the gate. And am I being indelicate in asking why those partnerships didn't work out?
No, I don't think so. And I'll say right up front too that even though I had two failed partnerships, I still think very highly of both of those people that I was partners with. I learned an awful lot from both of them. I'm really good friends with my second partner still. He's the head of the photo program at Spokane Falls Community College. I chair the advisory committee for that program. And every opportunity I get, if I run into my first partner, every time I run into him, I tell him how grateful I am for him bringing me into the business. I think largely it was financial. When finances are tight, it amplifies a lot of other issues. And, most small businesses struggle early on. And it was just hard. We weren't bringing enough money for two people to survive. And so the decision to break up those partnerships was largely just financial reasons.
I see.
I don't think there's any animosity or, I like to say, I say this to my assistant often, every business that ever opened will close.
Right.
Right. Like we were talking about before we got rolling, every festival that ever started will end.
Yeah.
Everything has a lifespan. Every business has a lifespan. Every partnership has a lifespan. And I have no regrets about those. I'm so grateful to both of those guys that I was partners with.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if there was maybe some friction because you were largely an autodidact when it came to photography, and they had more formal training, and if that resulted in some creative friction.
I don't think so. I mean, it's possible there was some undertones of that, but that's not why our partnerships ended. I was fortunate enough. I did land some big clients early on. I learned early on, too, how important relationships are in this business, like a lot of other businesses. And when I talk to students, I oftentimes will ask them, what do they think the three most important things are in being successful in this business? The hands will go up and, oh, you have to have a really good eye. Well, okay, yeah, you have to have a good camera or good equipment, or there's all kinds of answers that come up. But the three most important things, and again, it's true in a lot of other businesses too, but you have to get people to know you, to like you, and to trust you. Those three things are absolutely paramount. And I don't want to sound braggadocious, but I can make those things happen. I've had a better luck at making those things happen than maybe my partners did, and which I think is why I was. They asked me to become their partners. I don't know if I'm skirting around the answer to your question.
No. I felt like that was pretty forthright. I mean, financial issues, especially when you're looking at launching a business, that can result in, quite a bit of tension. Yeah. And so you had these kind of formative years as you were building a client base. And then you said you were fortunate enough to land some big clients early on. So I'm curious about when that pivot came, or when that leap came, when you went from struggling artist to someone who was landing larger clients.
Well, I landed one of those larger clients right away, actually.
Do you care to share who that was?
It was Kaiser Aluminum.
Oh, okay. There we go.
And in fact, I had just left my gig at the brewery. I kept an ownership stake. I was back in the brewery one day. I run into a guy who had been a longtime customer. Real nice guy. My wife and I had become friends with him. He'd taken us hot air ballooning.
Golfing, hot air ballooning, some of the perks of the profession.
I run into him and he says, "How's it going?" I said, "Oh, great." I said, "I'm not working here anymore, though. I left and started a photography business." And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, do you have a card?" I said, "Yeah." I had these freshly minted cards. I pulled one out and handed it to him, and he looked at it and he said, "Well, I'm going to have my purchasing agent call you on Monday." And, honestly, I'm so green, I don't even really know what a purchasing agent is, right? And I didn't even really know what he did. I knew he worked for Kaiser International is who he worked for. And on Monday, I get a call. This guy says, "Hey, Don says he wants you to do some photography for us. Why don't you come up here and meet with us and set up a time for me to go up and meet with them?" And, I put my portfolio together. It was mine and my partner at the time. I put our portfolio together, and I go up to Kaiser Aluminum to the Mead Works, and they didn't even want to look at it. They just wanted me to sign a contract to shoot photography for them. They never looked at my work. And that's when I started to get this idea that this know, like, and trust thing, how important that was. They had a photographer who had been shooting for them. They didn't like him. And Don really liked me. And it turns out he was the project manager for this $50 million new build they were doing up there at the plant, and wanted someone to come in and photograph the project while it was underway, and do these time-lapse projects of it, and all kinds of stuff. And they were a big client, and I did land them right away. But one client isn't enough.
Yeah.
Really. But I was able to land a couple of big clients. I got work from some ad agencies and some design firms that neither one of my partners had been working with. My wife is a graphic designer, and I had gotten to know a number of the companies that she worked with prior to getting into the business. And those relationships just all kind of came together and gave me some work right out of the chute. It just wasn't enough work, we were covering all of our expenses. We just weren't paying ourselves a lot of money.
Yeah. And what were you shooting for Kaiser Aluminum? Heavy industry? Were you doing portraits?
No, heavy industry. It was a carbon bake furnace that was being built. It was the first carbon bake furnace to be built in the United States since World War II. So it was kind of a big deal. They bake these blocks of carbon called anodes, and those are a critical component in the manufacturing of aluminum. Mm-hmm. And they, nationwide, all the plants that baked those anodes were, the newest ones were from the 40s. And so there was this big modern one being built up there at Meadworks, and my buddy Don was the guy who designed it and was the project manager for it, and I had no idea. But it was crazy. He would do things like, he asked me, have you ever done a time lapse? I said, no. He says, well, figure out how to do one, put an estimate together, and give it to me. I said, okay. And I went back and figured out all the necessary components to putting together a time lapse. Again, this is not the digital era yet.
I was just going to say, we're still in film.
Yeah. So I kind of figured it all out and put an estimate together. And it was a really big number to me back then. I think it was like $12,000. It was a 6-month time lapse. Mm-hmm. And I just thought it was an astronomical number, and I just thought there's no way, And I remember handing him the estimate, and he looked at it for about a split second. He goes, yeah, okay, let's do it. And so we were off and running. And my partner at the time washed his hands of it. He said, we don't do that kind of stuff. I don't do that. I don't know what, you're on your own.
I see. I
thought,
see.
okay, well, here we go, But,
well, that highlights, I think, the fact that, you embark on this career in commercial photography, and you're being asked to photograph, heavy machinery, which I don't know how much you had done up until that point. So here you are eyeing this heavy machinery, and then, this is where the art comes in, or the craft comes in, and then you have to make that look aesthetically appealing.
Yeah.
So had you done any, heavy machinery work and made that look sexy up until that point, or was that where you were getting your first taste of, industrial photography?
No, that's where I cut my teeth on it. Mm-hmm. And to this day, I still have a love of that kind of environment. I get asked to do a bunch of stuff for Avista in that same vein, and I love putting on my hard hat and my safety, my steel-toed boots and fall harness, and I'll hang out of cranes, and I have lineman gear. I'll climb utility poles. I've done all kinds of stuff. I love that kind of work. I don't know what I'd want to do it 7 days a week, but I really enjoy, the smell of carbon burning, welding. I love that kind of stuff. And it's sexy stuff, Most people don't ever get an opportunity to see the inside of one of those plants, and there's a lot of really neat stuff happening. It's a photo-rich environment.
Yeah.
And, I didn't have any experience doing it, but...
Yeah, you've done some sort of in situ portraits where you have folks who are, clearly at work and the sparks are flying.
Yeah.
It makes for, just something that's really visually captivating. But even some of this stagnant or, static machinery, it's not, well, you do capture certain dynamism. I'm reminded of one photograph that you'd taken. I don't know what it was of, but you managed to capture like a wheel in motion,
Yeah.
or a dynamo in motion. And so, that's again where the art or the craft comes in. But kind of while we're on this subject of industrial photography, it allows me to touch on HDR, because this was something that was kind of almost like a niche within photography for the longest time, because
Yeah.
you had to take multiple images, and HDR now is a mode that you can just toggle on your iPhone. But, certainly in the film era, you had to take it at multiple exposures and stack those photos. But really I think its advent came in the digital era. And, maybe you could speak to the use of HDR and getting these photos that are almost more true to what the eye takes in,
Yeah.
and are able to capture that larger dynamic range. But I know that was something that I definitely associated with your more industrial photos.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, HDR did not exist in the film era. It only came about in the digital era. We didn't have the ability to stack the imagery the way we do with digital files. But in general, our eye, I think light doubles on planet Earth like 25 times roughly. So there are 25 stops, we call stops of light. Every time light doubles from a 60th of a second to a 30th of a second, that's twice as much time. So that's twice as much light, right? We call that one stop. We have about 25 stops of light from the deepest shadows to the brightest highlights. Early digital cameras could only capture 5 stops of light before either the shadows would block up or the highlights would blow out. But if you had a scene that spanned, 15 or 20 or more stops of light, the only way to capture that fully was we would expose for the highlights and use all kinds of lighting gear to bring all the shadows up to within 5 stops of those highlights. Now in comes HDR photography, high dynamic range imaging, where we can shoot multiple exposures through the range of that dynamic range, and then use software to kind of blend all those files together to really capture all the detail from the deep shadows to the bright highlights. And there's a lot of different ways of processing those files. The holy grail is really you're shooting for photorealism, but you can create more cinematic looks. You can create almost cartoonish sort of looks with that. It's easy to be heavy-handed with HDR, just like with Photoshop or any image editing software. It's easy to be heavy-handed. And sometimes, there's a time and place maybe for some of that heavy-handedness, but most clients want something that looks photorealistic. I still shoot HDR. I just did a shoot 2-3 weeks ago, where I needed to shoot HDR. I was using a drone to do it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Shooting multiple exposures from 100 feet up in the air, just as the sun was peeking over the horizon, so as not to have the sun blow out, but have enough light to see the landscape that I was photographing. I had to shoot, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 exposures, and then in post-production align all the image files and then blend them together into an HDR file.
And was that something that you spotted early on? Because I've been a dilettante photographer for years and years, and so I had some awareness of these trends and was aware of HDR and some of the the software that had emerged so that you could stitch these digital images together. And I remember when I got more and more in the habit of taking multiple exposures before it could be done in camera.
Yeah.
Taking multiple exposures and then stitching them together with a certain type of software. But I remember when it emerged kind of on the scene, and the whole term HDR became a thing.
Yeah.
And so was this something that you became aware of and gravitated to early on because you recognized the possibility of it?
Yeah. I saw it very early on. I have a number of times over my career sent myself to these high-level workshops. There's 3 places in North America that cater to professional photographers to do high-level workshops. There's Santa Fe, New Mexico, in Vancouver, British Columbia, and then somewhere out in Maine. And I've been both to Santa Fe and to Vancouver, British Columbia. And I went to a week-long workshop with maybe the world's leading expert on HDR at the time, a guy named Dan Burkholder, and spent a week with him up there in Vancouver, kind of learning some of the techniques and how to do it and how to process the files. And this was really in its infancy. There was one piece of software that you could use at that time to actually piece together the files. It was some Belgian authored software. And it was just amazing. I just was blown away by it. And it was, it was a turning point, I mean, there were just things in photography. When you photograph a big, expansive interior, for example, you can't light it. There's not enough lighting equipment to bring in and light a cathedral or the interior of a giant industrial space. So it made architectural photography very challenging. As soon as HDR came around and I could figure out how to get the detail from those deep shadows and hold on to the detail in the bright highlights and show the midtones, it was revolutionary. And I spotted it early on and went and spent as much time as I could figuring it out.
And so you've had this commercial career where, I've gone through your portfolio and there is just this massive range of subjects and styles. And it's very chameleon-like in a lot of ways because it seems like you're adapting your camera or what you're shooting or the image to, to that industry or, that, whatever that happens to be. And you're taking excellent product shots, but there isn't one single visual language for all of them. Yeah. And I think there's probably something rewarding about being able to move into or inhabit kind of each of those photographic personas. But do you feel that a lot of that commercial photography maybe came at the expense of developing a singular style that was associated with you?
I don't think so. The short time I did go to school, they really pushed on us that we needed to focus in on a particular genre and really work that genre. And I never really liked that. I like variety. And, early on, going back to these workshops I was talking about, I had sent myself to a workshop in Santa Fe, New Mexico with a real famous photographer named Joe McNally. And these workshops, they only take 10 students. They come from all over the world. There's real famous photographers. And Joe McNally is a legend, And it was our first day in the workshop. And there's people from Caracas, Venezuela, and Stockholm, Sweden, and Spokane, Washington. And Joe says, I'm a generalist. He said, I don't really have a style. You just tell me what, a particular look that you want, and, I'll make that work. And I just thought, oh, wow, this is my guy. I like this guy a lot. He was speaking my language. And my whole career, I just, I don't know that I have a look or a style. I've had some people say, oh, I saw this image and I totally knew it was one of yours. And honestly, when they say that, I don't know what they're talking about.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And can you give me for instance of an image that they cited that they said this was, this was something that I singularly associate with Dean Davis?
It might have been like a portrait, a commercial portrait of some sort, an image in an annual report of a CEO or something like that.
Because there are images that I personally associate with you, but it's mostly from sitting on the Arts Commission and then seeing them for hours at a time as we sat in the boardroom. So there was one of an apartment building that I think is featured in the retrospective. That I know very well because I studied it from across the table. As,
that's in fact that's Vancouver, British Columbia, and I shot that image when I was at the workshop learning HDR.
There we go, and that explains why it's in an HDR format.
I love going from shooting a heavy industry shoot one day to being out on a golf course doing a photo shoot for the Kalispel tribe the next day to being in a corporate boardroom the day after that, shooting corporate headshots or some kind of a environmental portrait of a C-suite person. I like that variety. I don't think I would be happy doing one type of photography for my entire career. It's still, nearly 30 years in, has never felt like work to me. It's a career I don't think I'll ever retire from. I see, who knows what the future of our industry looks like with the advent of AI and some other technologies, but I think there's going to be room for someone like me. I hope.
Yeah. One hopes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you take a picture of someone and you do a standard corporate portrait, are you trying to inject any statement into that? Does Dean Davis, the fine art photographer, find his way into that? Or are you just saying, I just want to make this as aesthetically pleasing as possible. I'm not out to, necessarily capture this person's personality. I want it to look good in a brochure, for example.
No, I think there's some things that I want to try and say with some of my imagery of particularly in the corporate photography, corporate portraits that I do. Particularly when I'm working with the C-suite folks.
Yeah.
I want to project power. There are things that I do in the way I don't get too posy with people, but I will stand in place. It's real common for me. It doesn't matter if I'm shooting the CEO of Avista or of Providence. I'll say, can I be you for a second? And I'll sit at their desk and I'll do exactly, it's easier for me to
You'll model the power pose.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll say, and I'll put my hands in it, it's easier for me to just sit and do that stuff or stand in a particular spot and stand the way I want them to stand and for them to look at me and go, oh yeah, I can do that. So that's real common for me to do that. And, I always, when I'm working with those C-suite folks, try to project power with them. I think it's something that's really important is creating a connection with the people I'm photographing. And I do that with every person that I photograph. I don't care if I've got 20 people standing in line and I'm doing just headshots one after the other and I have them for 90 seconds. I still try to create some kind of a connection with them as I'm working with them before I take the first frame. And I think that comes through in the images. But yeah, there's subtle things that I'll do when I'm shooting C-suite folks. I'll shoot from a low angle so that they look a little bit taller and I don't know.
Well, speaking of headshots, one after the other, pictures of poets.
Yeah.
And here, we enter the fine art realm, and this was a very simple lighting, but I think you had mentioned that you'd never done this very simplistic style of lighting. It was just light through an umbrella,
right,
and that was it, and it was just headshots of poets from across the state, if I'm not mistaken. No.
Well, I am shooting across the state, but I'm getting poets from across the country. I'm going to literary festivals that are drawing poets from around the country, but I'm primarily in the state of Washington when I'm shooting them.
I see. And that began, I think, 2019-ish, if memory serves. I think the idea was hatched in maybe earlier than that, but you first started shooting in 2019. Is that right? Do I have that timeline accurate?
I think that's about right. Okay. Maybe 2018, 2019, something like that. Yeah. It's still an ongoing project. I've got another poet lined up in December that's coming to Spokane for me to photograph and record for the website.
Yeah, and just for folks who aren't familiar with this, we should probably explain what that is because it's black and white, so
right,
monochrome headshots of the various poets. And then there is a website. There have also been gallery exhibitions, but there is a website that then has audio files that kind of sync up with the headshot, and then you can play them reading their own poetry.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. Pictures of Poets is the name of the project. It's also the website picturesofpoets.com. I have about 200 poets on there right now.
Yeah,
it is a very in-your-face kind of photography. I'm literally, I'm literally like a foot and a half from them with my camera. It's so unusual the way I'm photographing these people. Our knees are touching, you know.
But why? Why did you choose that? Because was that the most intimate method that you could think of?
Yeah, partly it was the way I decided to light it with this umbrella light, and it's very, very close to them. And not to get too technical about how light works, but the closer, there's something called the inverse square law, and light falls off very quickly the closer you get it to someone. And so it's a very that's the lighting style I wanted to go with. I wanted their faces to be lit, but I wanted it to fall off very quickly. And so that meant getting that light real close, and that meant me getting real close as well. And like I say, our knees are touching. We're so close to each other as we're shooting.
Well, there's that connection.
Yeah, it's so unusual. Normally, when I'm shooting a headshot, I'm using a longer lens. It gives me some distance between me and the subject. So it's both the lighting and the way I'm photographing them are both very different for me, and I'm sure for those people, the way they've been photographed.
And what has the response been to that, both by the poets themselves and the wider public?
I'd say it's been super positive. I've given all the poets the imagery that I have created of them. The imagery that goes onto the website, I have sent that to the poets as well, for them to use in any way they want. And many, many of those poets have used those images in promotional materials, in books. I've had major publications reach out to me and ask me to use those images on the cover of their publication. I have photographed several of the poets that I have photographed, it turns out, are somewhat famous American poets. And it's been really fun to see them use those images. I've had a few shows now with that work.
I think you had 4 exhibitions, and yeah.
I think that's right. I had one at North Idaho College. I had one out at Mercersburg Academy in Pennsylvania. I had one at the museum here, the MAC, the Northwest Museum of Arts and Culture. I had one at Barrister Winery.
Okay.
So I've shown the poets 4 times. And I guess I have 4 of them in the retrospective that's out at Spokane Falls Community College right now also.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. So you have just 4 portraits from this 200 portrait collection that are in the retrospective.
Yeah, that's right.
What else is in the retrospective? Because we've covered, I think, broad swaths of your career, the commercial photography and the variety that's within that, and pictures of poets. And I mean, you've also done fine art photography. So what photographs and what works are going to find their way into the retrospective?
Yeah, great question. I've taken bits and pieces from the museum exhibitions I've had, from the winery shows I've had.
Because you had a MAC exhibition in, I think, 2014, so about 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I had a project called The Artist's Palette that ran from July, I think, of 2014 through like February of 2015. So those are artist palettes that I photographed, and I have 4 of those pieces in this exhibition. I had a show called Our Little Town, which is all tilt shift work.
Oh wow!
And
another photographic trend for a while.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know what a tilt shift image is, it's an image that makes the scene appear as if it's a toy model, like a model,
like
set.
on a Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I don't know if everybody will still get that reference, but you have those sort of micro towns. And
So I have a couple of images from that project. So I've taken bits and pieces. There's some images in there that weren't in any of my shows that I just picked that was personal work. That image of the turbine that you referenced earlier is an image that I've never had in a show, but it's an image that's kind of near and dear to me, and so I included that. I've got some. I had one of my cameras converted permanently to color infrared. And I have a couple of those images in this show. Those are newer images. I did a show called Lights and Shadows where I photographed light bulbs. And I have a couple of those pieces in this show. There's 21 pieces in total in the show.
Yeah, and you're talking about photographing light bulbs. Again, among your commercial photography, I saw there was a picture of various objects where it was simply those objects and the background was completely stark. So I think there were 2 sort of orange wedges that were in that. There was a Ruger of all things.
Yeah.
So that the gun was photographed on a completely stark white background, and so it was almost isolating these objects as much as possible and making the background vanish, which I suspect, knowing you, probably involved very little digital manipulation. You were trying to capture that as purely as possible within that environment.
Yeah, those are largely in camera. I'm grateful that I came up through the film era, when we had to get it right in camera, and when the bulk of my photography was with a 4x5 camera. And again, for those of you who don't know what a 4x5 is, that's the billows, the black cloth over your head, and the film is 4 inches by 5 inches, and it's a very contemplative approach to photography. And I brought that experience forward into the digital era with me, and try to always get it in camera if I can. But yeah, both those images that you talked about, the Clementine,
okay,
and the Ruger. The Clementine was just me playing with my food. The other image was one that I was commissioned to do by the NRA. I've done a few projects for the NRA for a magazine they had years ago, and that image was for them. But yeah, I like that clean aesthetic.
And do any of those make it into the retrospective as well?
No.
Okay.
No, the gallery at Spokane Falls Community College is not giant, and I tend to work at large scale. Most of the images that you'll find out there are 3 feet by 5 feet, or bigger. There's a couple of smaller ones out there, but those giant pieces, 21 pieces really fills the space in that gallery. So it's hard to have a retrospective with 21 images.
Well, it forces you to be very ruthless about what you choose to represent you and what you choose to say, this speaks to my career.
Yeah.
So maybe that was a healthy process. I'm not sure.
I think so. And I'm pretty good at editing. I'm pretty good at being able to look at 50 images, and if I need 20 to just knock 30 of them out. Mm-hmm. I think that's just come with, time and experience and looking at images and trusting my own instincts.
And it did just occur to me when you were talking about the large scale images, not only are you involved in the taking of images, within the camera and being on that side, but also in the printing or, creation of those images, a physical manifestation of those images. And one of those processes is giclée, which, you have definitely been, if not a strong proponent, then a practitioner of. And this is it's a special inkjet process. Am I right in understanding that really caters to the longevity of the piece? Yeah,
it's giclée print means pigment ink sprayed onto an archival substrate. Mm-hmm. That's what defines a giclée print. They used to be called iris proofs, but someone decided that wasn't sexy enough and came up with
make it French.
Use a French word, which I understand in French actually has a different connotation. But that's essentially it, pigment ink. And a lot of inkjet printers use dye-based inks, and those dye-based inks will break down and fade over time, whereas the pigment inks, particularly when they're applied to a archival substrate, have a lifespan of 150 years or so. And so, again, early on, I got myself an inkjet printer, a pigment-based inkjet printer, and started producing prints, in the early 2000s. And have continued to do that. I've gone through a whole bunch of printers over the years, and I have these 44-inch wide printers. I print all my own stuff. I print work for museums now, for museum exhibitions, for other artists. I do lots of fine art reproduction work for artists, for institutions, for myself.
And we just bumped into one another most recently at the Davenport Legacy exhibition. So did you use that process in creating those, any of those for the images for the Davenport Legacy exhibition, or were you largely responsible just for photographing the objects?
I was largely responsible for creating the imagery for the book that accompanied the exhibition. There were no Well, I did have one large print of mine in that exhibition, but I did not produce the print. The museum did.
I see.
And it was a contemporary image of the Davenport lobby. But there was a recent exhibition by the Japanese photographer Frank Matsura. And I produced that exhibition. I got his original glass plates, digitized them, cleaned them up, made large-scale prints, which was an amazing opportunity. I've always appreciated Frank Metzger's work, and to be asked to participate at that level in producing a show of his was kind of a dream come true.
Yeah, and that was the first exhibition, I think, or the first larger scale exhibition of his work that had been done, at any time in recent history, if I'm not mistaken. No,
ever. That's right. Yeah. He shot largely most of these images that I worked from were 5x7 glass plates. And in his era, he would have used those 5x7 glass plates to make contact prints, 5x7 prints. There wouldn't have been an enlarger yet for him to stick that plate in and make an enlargement from that 5x7. If you wanted an 8x10 back then, you had to shoot an 8x10 glass plate and make a contact print that was 8x10. But a 5x7 glass plate, that's a giant negative. Going back to the camera I used when I started it, the 4x5, that made big, beautiful prints off those 4x5 negatives. But that was 4 inches by 5 inches. These glass plates were 5 inches by 7 inches. They're massive, an amazing amount of detail. And I think Frank Matsura would have flipped out because some of the prints I made off of those glass plates were 40 by 60.
Yeah.
And I spent 60 hours cleaning up the plates. There were bits and pieces that had flecked off. I didn't touch anything. I basically tried to bring the images back to what I thought they might have looked like the day that Frank might have shot the image and put the glass plate away. Over 100 years, those glass plates got beat up, scratched, bits and pieces of emulsion had flaked off, and I cleaned all that stuff up, knowing that the prints were going to be gigantic. I think when people look at older images, there's a certain acceptance of all the scratches and whatnot.
Yeah, you're a little forgiving.
Yeah, but I really wanted these to be really clean. And so I spent about 3 hours per image in Photoshop, working at painstakingly to clean all that stuff up. And boy, the prints just came out so beautifully. And it's really unusual to see images from that era at that scale.
Yeah.
And
so on top of all this photographic work, you've also developed this, other passion project, which is ceramics. When did that start?
Yeah, well, my wife and I have collected art for a long time. And in amongst our collection, we have a couple hundred ceramic pieces or more. I don't know how many we have. But about 4 years ago, I bought a piece, and the gallery owners were super excited to tell me how it was made. And they just started chattering on about how it was made. And I remember looking at them thinking, boy, I know that's English you're speaking, but I have no idea what you're talking about. And I was kind of embarrassed, honestly. I left the gallery, and I thought, boy, here's all the ceramic work I have. I have no idea how it's made. And I went back to my studio, and I did a quick internet search on one of the ceramicists whose work I've collected and found a maker's video of him making a vase. And as soon as I saw him making it, I thought, oh, I got to try that.
Yeah.
And I got myself signed up for a class just across the street
Urban
here.
Art Co-op?
Yeah. I signed up for 2 classes, actually, a Wednesday afternoon and a Wednesday evening class. And literally the first time I touched the clay, it was just like, where has this been my whole life?
Really? So it was kind of the same kind of homecoming that you felt with photography.
Yeah. It's hard to say. That photography, bug, that started real young.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, maybe when I was about 15, 16. Yeah, when I touched the clay, I just thought, wow. I was just bowled over, and I just dove in head first. I couldn't get enough of it. I took those 2 classes. I signed up for another 2 classes, the same 2 classes back to back. I started watching YouTube videos nonstop. I just spent so much time in the clay studio. I've switched studios now. I'm at the Clay Connection down on Sprague. But now I teach a class there on Sunday mornings.
Oh, wow. The pupil has become the teacher, huh?
It's a class I call The Blind Leading the Blind. It's a beginning wheel throwing class, and I've been teaching it for a little over a year now. And I love it. I just can't get enough of it. And it's so fun. It's so exciting to turn other people onto ceramics. And, I was teaching at EWU last year. They had asked me to come in and teach some photography classes. And, it wasn't... I was always remiss that I didn't stay in school because I thought someday I'd like to teach at the college level, and I would need that parchment to do that. And so I was a little surprised, when they came and recruited me to teach there. I had to tell them right away, I don't have a degree. And, it's adjunct, and, you don't, for what they wanted me to teach, it just wasn't required that I had a degree. But, the students were... they all basically just did the bare minimum to get through the class. None of them were really on a path to become a photographer. It was an elective that they were taking.
Right.
It just wasn't very fulfilling for me. This teaching the ceramics class, though, is very different. People are so excited about it and are so enthused. And it's a very different thing teaching this 5-week ceramics class versus teaching a college level class. But I'm really, really enjoying it, and I'm going to keep doing it as long as I can.
Photography, though, that is not under threat. You're not going to forsake photography for ceramics. Two loves that you're going to balance at the same time.
I do like to say that if I didn't love my work so much, I would quit tomorrow and become a potter full time because I love it so much. But I love my work. Like I said, and it's never felt like work yet. I can't even believe. I have so much fun. I don't care if I'm shooting corporate headshots or gas meters or hanging out of an airplane. I don't care what I'm shooting. I'm just thrilled anytime I'm standing behind a camera making images, or even doing the post-processing work. I love it all. I feel so lucky. I feel like the luckiest guy on the planet, honestly. I would like to figure out a way to get a little bit more time in the ceramic studio. I did just shoot another book for the museum that is all ceramics.
That's a good way to combine both of them.
An upcoming exhibition that will happen in 2028.
Okay.
And I photographed 300 amazing ceramic pieces for this project. And in fact, I'm doing all the post-processing right now on all those images. And talk about combining two passions. Yeah.
Cool. So we can look forward not just to this retrospective that's taking place now, but all the way to 2028. We've got the lead on that exhibition as well.
That'll be at the Northwest Museum of Arts and Culture. It'll be a major ceramics exhibition featuring all work from the collection of Jim Colva and Pat Sullivan.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. So we've touched on photography, we've touched on ceramics, and now we move into the lightning round. And I don't know if you're ready for this.
Okay.
But you've never been one to turn down a challenge or an adventure.
Yeah,
so
bring it on.
Yeah, this is the coda to every interview. And this first question, so it's always an either or.
Okay.
And this is going to tie into our previous conversation. Black and white or color?
Color.
Why?
I can go to black and white from color. I can't go from black and white to color.
Yeah, it's kind of, you could, you could, certainly in the digital age as well, you could, like Turner Classics, you can colorize them, but they always have that artificiality, don't they?
All those poet portraits, while they end up in black and white, I shoot them all in color and convert them to black and white.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Those were what I had in mind as I was coming up with that either or choice, because I thought you'd say, oh man, those poet portraits, they're all in black and white, and there's a certain...
Oh, I love black and white, don't get me wrong, but I can get there from color. I've never been nostalgic about photography or processes. Film, if I never spent another minute in a darkroom, that'd be just fine with me. I don't want to go back to film. I've been shooting all digital since July of 2000.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's early adopter all around.
Yeah.
All around. All right. Now we're going to hark back all the way to your translator days. A Dutch word or a custom that you would like to see incorporated into American culture? Is that fries with mayo? Is that is there a particular Dutch curse word that you think really would be at home? And because we've adopted so many German words, Schadenfreude and Doppelganger, and is there a good Dutch word that we should use
Well,
more?
I mean, I'd like to see us riding bicycles more.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing in Holland. People ride bicycles everywhere, and it's way healthier. It's less pollution. The bicycling culture in the Netherlands, there's no other country quite like it when it comes to that. I'd like to see us.
And it's amazing how quickly traffic kind of dissipates when people take to their bicycles.
Mm-hmm.
So traffic becomes much less of an issue.
Yeah.
So the bike riding, huh?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to pick one thing, that might be it. Yeah.
Cool. Changing gears slightly.
Okay.
What is a smell that takes you back to your childhood?
Oh, coconut.
Okay. Do tell.
Well, we lived in the Philippines for a few years when I was a kid. And,
okay. So born in Würzburg and then moved
to Biloxi,
okay,
Mississippi, and then to the Philippines.
Okay.
So all foreign places. Yeah.
And is that where you cultivated your love of the blues?
In Biloxi?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was too young for that. But yeah, to this day, the smell of coconut, the taste of it, I mean, I love coconut, and it brings me right back to the Philippines.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dean, thank you so much for coming in today.
Yeah,
and
you're
chatting
welcome.
about
This has been great. I appreciate it.